Alright, today we're going to be doing the obligatory model whenever you're trying to 3D model for 3D printing. Let's do a lightsaber. You can see a finished copy up here on the screen. It is a little bit of a mashup of a couple of them you see over here on the right hand side. But I was really going for the Obi-Wan Kenobi lightsaber, and then there were a few other little characteristics that I liked and that were easier to model, so I threw those in there. But feel free to play around with this and add your own little flair to it. Alright, let's get started. I'm going to minimize that picture, and I am going to drag our model off to the side. Actually, before I drag it off to the side, let me point out a couple of things. We're going to do this in stages, kind of 6 stages. So there's going to be this base piece here we'll get started with. You can see there's a cylinder on the inside and a bunch of little fins. Similar idea for this second stage, this black piece here. It's a cylinder with some fins on it, except the fins are just different shape. This will probably be the most challenging part here in the middle because we're going to add a few buttons to it. And then there is this chunk in the middle that's got some interesting shape to it, and then we'll come up to kind of a double layer tip. And I'll just pull this reference model off to the side and we can reference back to it whenever we need to. Alright, so I'm going to pull that off and I'm going to get started doing that base. That base starts with a cylinder. So I'll bring in a cylinder and drop it on the work plane. And then the cylinder, I'm going to change the size to 45. Tab over to the other value, 45. And the height on this one, I'm going to make it 25. I'm going to zoom in a little on this, so take your last look for a moment. Over at this base, you can see cylinder and then funky little fins. Alright, let's smooth this thing out a little bit. So we're going to add some more sides to it. I like to just slide the slider all the way over to 64 sides. Gives you kind of a nice smooth outer cylinder. I'm going to add a bevel to it as well. Because we haven't used a bevel a whole lot yet in this course. Kind of a cool way just to whack off the corner of your shape, and it makes it a little smoother like that. We're going to be doing that a lot in this model. So a little bit of a bevel, I set it to 1.25, and then the sides all the way over. Alright, let's make the little nubs on the side there. I'm going to grab a box and bring that in, and then I'm going to shrink this box up. It comes in 20 by 20 by 20. I'm going to make this one 10. Just type it in here. 10. And I'll leave it at 23 deep. That doesn't matter for right now. And then the height of this one, my cylinder height is 25, right? 22. I want to make this one a little bit shorter than that, so let's bring that down to like 15. Okay. And so I have one box. I'm going to duplicate this box a few times now and use those duplicates as a cutter. So I'll select my box and I'll come up and hit the duplicate key. And I'm just going to pull a box off to the side and I change that into a hole. And then I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees on this axis by grabbing the curvy arrow there, and I can hold down shift and it will get it perfectly at 45. I'm going to rotate around a little bit until I'm looking at my box is from the side, and then I want to kind of pull this thing up get it in position so it's pull it up a little bit, get back to looking at it from that side. What I'm trying to do is just kind of whack off that corner a little bit there. So let me pull it up a little bit more. I'll use the arrow keys to move it into position. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'll take it. Alright, I'm going to duplicate this whole box now so that I have that one selected. I'll do Command D. Bring it straight down. Oops, actually that's not straight down. Little black cylinder there is straight down. Alright, so now I've brought it straight down. Now I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees so that it is almost a mirror image of the first one. Then I'm going to bring it back up, straight up. And I'll line it up about like that. Okay, now I need one more box. This box is going to be a hole. So I'm going to come over and kind of chop off the back side of this one. Alright, this looks pretty good, and all the magic's going to happen when I select all this stuff and group it. And now you can see I have a little nub that's going to be able to stick out, very much like our model over here. Now I didn't get this one to look exactly like the first attempt. I think I could have changed those boxes a little bit, but actually I like this one. I think it's going to work out just fine. So I will take this shape, I'm going to rotate it. 90 degrees. And then I'm going to just put it in place on the side, in this case kind of on the top of my shape, of my cylinder. And actually I can align these as well. So I will align these on that axis. Sorry guys, a little sloppy today here. D. So D is going to put it back up on the work plane, and then hopefully I can get this guy just to slide right in there. Looking at it purely from the top view. And it's looking pretty good. Let me try that alignment again, selecting both of those and aligning them. And then it looks like it's sticking out a little too far. I'll just use my arrow keys to slide that in like that. All right, so now I have one. I just need to copy those things and move them around. All right, so I'm going to grab that little nub that I just did. I'm going to hit the duplicate key. And so that's going to give me a duplicate. And I want to rotate that one 45 degrees. So I'll hold down Shift and rotate 45 degrees. Now let's go move that into position, and there's going to be one at each of the top, bottom, left, and right, and then right in the middle in between there. So I'm going to set up this first one where I like it. And that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to select that duplicate that I did. I'm going to hit duplicate. And this is kind of a weird thing with TinkerCAD. If you didn't do a whole bunch of moves and you hit duplicate, it will see your pattern and it'll give me another one right at the 9 o'clock position. I did have to move it a little too much though, so I bet it's not going to get it this time, but I bet it will the next time. Let's see, I'm going to hit duplicate. Yeah, and it didn't give me that perfect copy. So this time I'm going to try to just do it in as few moves as possible. I'm going to rotate that thing 45 degrees. And I'm going to move it right over where I want it. So I've only done 2 moves here. Now hopefully when I hit duplicate, yeah, now it's picked it up and it kind of sees the pattern that I'm trying to do, and it's going to give me that nice array. Alright. And I'm just going to give it the eyeball. It does look like it's perfectly centered in there as well. And it's looking pretty good. I think those little nubs are a little low, so I'm going to select the cylinder in the middle and just drop it down a bit. And that looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to select it all, group it, change the color to something cool. I think this one will work out good with kind of a gray. And I'm done with that first piece. I'll pull that off to the side. All right, let's go back and look at the example piece. And you can see it's not identical to what I did. That's part of the fun. Add your own creativity. All right, and now we'll move on to this next step. And it's going to be a similar thing. It's going to be a cylinder, except there is going to be a little bit different array. It's going to be an array of boxes, a little bit easier actually. So we're going to start with the cylinder. Bring that in. This cylinder is going to be pretty big. I'll click on the gray square down in the bottom there. Allows me to change my values. This one's going to be 40. Hit tab by 40. Enter. So it's going to be a 40 diameter, 40 millimeter diameter cylinder. And then the height on this one, I'm going to crank it up to 50. Alright. Now I'm going to grab a box. And I'm going to make a long, skinny box. This box is going to be 45 millimeters by 5 millimeters. And I want to match the height of my cylinder at 50. Okay, now I'm going to align these. Select both the cylinder and the box. Align command. I will align them on the X and the Y axis. Okay. Now I just need to rotate that box a little bit. I'm going to do kind of the same array trick that I did over here with the little nubs on the base. So I'll select my box. I will do Command D for duplicate. And I'm going to rotate this thing a magic number 22.5 degrees. Call that a magic number because when we keep rotating this over and over again, it's going to line up perfectly with 360, and that's going to be a full circle for us. All right, so I've done that one rotation. Let me just come up here and do the duplicate and repeat. I could also do Command D here, and I'm just going to keep doing it until it duplicates all the way around. All right, looks good. I'm going to select them all, group them, and I think I'm going to change this color. We're going to go for black. All right, now I need to align these things. A few ways I could do that. I like to change the work plane. So I'm going to click on the work plane tool. I'm going to click on top of my base there. And then with my little gear looking thing selected, I'm going to hit the letter D. That drops it onto the work plane that I just established. I'll put the work plane back where it belongs. And now I can just align these by selecting both of them and the align command, and I can align them on the X and the Y axis. And a quick little tour around. Looks like it's looking pretty good. All right. Now, let's go for the hard one here. This third chunk of our lightsaber is a cylinder. That one's easy, but then we got a couple of buttons that we need to do. I don't know, on-off buttons. I guess I'm not enough of a Star Wars guy to know what all the parts of the lightsaber are. I know if you Google it, someone could tell you. But I'll show you how to model it. So I'm going to grab the cylinder and bring that in. All right, and then this cylinder is going to be the same diameter as what we've been working with before. We're going to go for 40. So I'm going to click on the little gray handlebar there. I'm going to go 40 by 40. And then the height on this one, let's keep doing that same 50 chunk we've been doing. And again, I'm going to crank up the sides so it looks a little smoother. And I'll give this one a little bevel as well. All right, let's change the color. Can't have an orange lightsaber, so I'm going to go with gray. And actually, I think I might want to make this one a little bit bigger. When I added the gears to the outside of this one, it actually went to 45. So I'm going to change that from 45 by 45. So it's a 45 millimeter diameter. All right, and now let's get to the fun parts here. Let's put a little button on here. I'm going to grab a cylinder and bring that one in. And the cylinder, I'm going to make it a 15 millimeter diameter. So 15 and 15. And the height, I can bring that down a little bit, bring that down to like 10. All right, now I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. So it's kind of on its side, right? See that? Now this is going to be kind of like the black base of the button. So I'm going to just go ahead and change that color right now. So I'm going to change that to black. And then you can see in the example over here, I want to do another cylinder that is going to be red. And then a second button that has a gray one on there. So I'm going to duplicate that. Actually, let me crank up the sides first. So it's nice and smooth once again. And give it a little bit of a bevel as well. I'm going to zoom in a little. Alright, and now I'm going to duplicate it. Command D. And I'm going to pull it straight out. And then I'm going to shrink it up a little bit. So instead of being 15 by 15, I want this one to be, I don't know, maybe let's go 10. And since I rotated it, I have to select the Z-axis, so 10. And I'll change this one to red. It's going to be my button color. And this is going to work out pretty good. Let me select both of these and align them. And let's just align them on all three axes, X, Y, and Z. And it does kind of bury my button just a little bit, but real easy. I can just grab that, and I'll use the arrow keys here to pull it out. Just a couple. Alright, how's that look compared to our other one? I think our other one might have been a little bit wider, but again, feel free to have some creative license on this. So now I will select it, and I'm going to group these guys together. When I group them though, they're going to both change to one color, so now they're both black. I do want them to be two different colors, so over here on the color selector, I will click multicolor. And they are still grouped, they're still one object, but there's multiple colors in that group. Alright, let's get this lined up on that large cylinder. I'm going to do this straight from the top view. Just kind of makes it a little easier, I think, to line it up just right. I'll orbit around. Looks pretty good to me. Bring it up on the Z-axis. And actually, I don't really like how that's coming out. It's a little crooked. Sorry. So I'm going to try aligning it and see if that's going to help me out here. Align on this axis. There we go. That looks good. All right, now I'm going to select my button, and I'm going to put two buttons on here. So I'll do Command D for duplicate, and I'm going to pull that duplicate straight up. And then I do want to change the color on this just to give it a little variety. So I'm going to select that top button and ungroup it momentarily. Click off, and then click on just the button, and I'm going to make this one like a light gray. And then I'll select this whole component, group it all together, and then I'll move it in place using that same trick where I take the work plane, put it on top of my lightsaber, select my piece, my new component, hit D to drop it on the work plane. I'll move the work plane back to its home position, and I will select all these components. So now there's actually 3 components, and I will align them using the align command on the X and on the Y. Oh, and you know what? Because these buttons are sticking out a little bit, it's actually making the align not quite perfect. That is okay. I will select my this component. I'm going to make it temporarily transparent so I can see through it. I'll do this straight from the top view. I'll just use the arrow keys like the left button a couple of times. All right. And that's pretty darn good. Let me make that no longer transparent. And we're just about done with that component. I forgot we want to do a little series of buttons on the sides too, just to make it a little fancier. That's okay, we can move it up with it already in position. So that's our next step, is to make this kind of Lego looking piece. To do that, we're going to start with a box. And we're going to stretch it up almost the whole height of this component, which I believe is 45. So let's go a little short of that. Let's go for like a 40. And then we're going to shrink this up a little bit. Let's go for, I think if we do like a 15. So it has a height of 40. And a width of 15. And I actually don't care about the depth too much. Right now it's at 27. That'll just get buried in that component, so it'll be fine. All right, so that is the start of my kind of housing for the buttons. Let me duplicate that shape. So I'll do Command D and duplicate it. And then I'm going to bring it out, make it kind of separate from the other piece, and I will change it into a hole. And I want to make a cut that does a little bit of an inset little piece there. So let me just shrink these numbers up a bit. So I got 15. How about I take 2 off of that, 2 millimeters off of all these values. So let's go 13. Let's go 25. And then for the Z, let's go 38. Okay, and now I can align these. So I'll select both these objects and hit align. And I can align these on all 3 axes. That does make my hole kind of buried inside of my shape. That is okay. I can just grab either shape. In this case, it's the outer solid piece. I'm just going to pull it back until they're separate. And then I'm going to move it until... You can tell right when that changes color, it's on the surface. So I'm going to change it until it hits the... I'm going to move it until it changes color. And then I'm going to come in just a couple and then group them up and see if that looks right. Yeah, that looks good. It's got a little hole in there, a little inset in there. All right, let's add some buttons to it. So I'll grab a cylinder and I'll bring the cylinder in. We'll shrink it up. So I'll grab the handlebar in the corner and I'm going to hold down Shift as I do it to shrink it up quite a bit. And I'm going to get it down to, I think, about, let's go for about 9. All right, that looks good. Now I'll rotate it 90 degrees. And I'm going to go put it in place. All right, so I can select it and align it and get it perfect using the align command on that axis, so it's right there in the middle. And then I'm going to bring it up until it clears that lip, and that looks pretty good to me. Alright, so let's go for 3 or 4 buttons you could choose. I'll do Command D for duplicate, and then I'm going to just grab the black cone and bring it straight up. And I think this, the way my sizes are working out, this will be perfect if I do 3 of them. So in fact, why don't I select this, what will be my middle button and the red outer tab, and align them on the Z-axis. That's the way I know it's right in the middle. And I can hit Command D to duplicate and bring this guy straight up. Alright, that looks good. Let me just select them all and make sure they are aligned on the center there. It looks like it is because the little handlebar is already grayed out. So there we go. Now I'm going to group these guys together and put them in place. So I'll hit group. And then I do need to change this to a multicolor. And then I need to put it in place. I'm going to go for kind of 90 degrees off to the side of that other one. So let me select this object and rotate it 90 degrees. And then I will move it into place. Look at it straight from the top. There we go. That was probably the hardest part of it. Our next part, we're going to do kind of a funky, cool little shape there. And to do that shape, we're going to do a technique similar to what we did with the base, where we're going to kind of lop off the edge of, in this case, we're actually going to use a cylinder, and we're going to kind of lop off the corner. All right, so just follow along with me. Sorry to be zooming all over on you. And here's how we do it. We're going to grab a cylinder and drop that in. That cylinder is going to be kind of that standard thickness that we've been working with, 40 by 40. And then the Z on this one, the height, let's bring that down to about 10. So I have a 40 millimeter diameter and a 10 millimeter height. Now I want to cut this thing into quarters. So I'm going to grab a box. I'm going to stretch that box out. And I'm going to make it skinny. I'm going to go for, I think we're going to make this thing 5 millimeters in width. I do want to make sure it's high enough. There's going to be a cutter. So I'll turn it into the hole, and that looks good to me. You select both of these pieces and do a line on the X and on the Y. Okay, so I could cut this circle in half right now, but I wanted to cut it in quarters. So let me just duplicate that hole. So I'll select it, do Command D, and then I'm going to rotate that copy 90 degrees. Okay. Select all three of those objects and group them up. And I have now cut my circle into 4 pieces. All right, I only want one of these pieces though, so I can't just select one and delete it. You know, it's treating it like one object, so I do need to use a box that's going to be a hole. And I'm going to just kind of cover up 2 pieces, select them and group them, and then do that same thing to get rid of the other piece, and I am left with just a quarter of my original circle. Alright, this is where it could get a little interesting here. I want to lop off a couple of edges here just to get this kind of cool organic shape like you see in the model over there. But to do that, I'm just going to be using some boxes as holes. Thing is, the angles can get a little weird, so I'm going to drag in a box hole. And then I want to rotate it 45 degrees this way. And I also want to rotate it. Oh, actually, you know what? I want to make this box a little bigger before I do these rotations. So let me do Command Z and undo. And I want to make this thing a little bit bigger. Let's go for a 40 by 40. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right, now I'll rotate it. 45 degrees and 45 degrees. And you can kind of see where we're going here. I'm going to go try to move this until I'm taking off a chunk of that. That's going to be easier if it's up a little higher. Let me orbit around here. There we go. There's a little bit better angle for us. Alright, I think I'm headed a little too high. So feel free to take your time with this one. Play around with it. You definitely have to get the angle you're looking at it right. And you know, if it doesn't work the first time, just delete it and try re-rotating your angles there. But that's pretty much what I want to do, so that's working out pretty good. But I want to do this on the top and the bottom of this piece. So I'm going to do Command D to duplicate. I'm going to drag this straight down. But I want it to kind of come at it from the other angle, so I'm going to mirror this piece. So I got the bottom hole selected. I'm going to hit mirror. I'm going to mirror it on that axis. And then I'm going to bring it straight up, maybe trying to get it somewhat symmetrical. That's looking pretty good. I like it. I'll select it all and group them up. Alright, that's going to be a cool shape for us. Now I can use this shape to kind of rebuild my circle. So I'll select it and do Command D for duplicate. And I'll move it down. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to get them lined back up, so I'll select it, hit the align, select both of them, and I'll align it on that axis. And I want it to be a little bit closer to that, so I'll just use the arrow keys to bring it in. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I'll select both of those objects. I'm going to group them up. I'm going to do Command D for duplicate, and then I'm going to mirror that duplicate on this axis. Then I can just use my arrow keys, slide it to the side, and I have kind of rebuilt my circle, but with a whole lot more character. Alright, looks good. Next step, I'm going to grab a cylinder. I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to change the color on this one just because we're going to be kind of combining it with the other orange shape, and it's nice to be able to tell the difference. I'll just make it a light gray for right now, and then I want to get it so that it's in the center and probably a little bit bigger than that. I'm going to look at this straight from the top, and then actually, no, one thing I think I forgot to do, let me pull this off to the side. I don't think I ever grouped all of these things. I'm going to select all 4 of those little shapes and group them up so they're all one object. Now when I bring this one in, it looks like that inner cylinder is a little small, so let me make it a little bigger. Holding down shift while I do this so it remains perfect circle. I think that's going to work out, so let me select it and we'll align it on the X and Y. So you can see I have a cylinder and then the cool little shapes on the bottom, and what we're going for is we're going to kind of repeat these shapes all the way up the cylinder. So let me make that cylinder a little bit taller. It's at 25 right now. I think I can get some good height here. Let me bring that up to 100 millimeters. All right. Now I'm going to select my row of cool little shapes here and do Command D for duplicate. Zoom in a little so I can see when I bring them straight up. I want just a little bit of a gap in there, just like that. Right. And now I will do Command D. It should duplicate it and just run it all the way up that cylinder. Alright. And it looks like they didn't quite line up perfect. That is okay. Let me see if I can get in there and just select my cylinder, only my cylinder, and then bring it up until it's right at that same surface. Alright. Cool little lightsaber shape. Let me select it all. Group them up. Change that color to black. And then I'm going to get it up here in position. And move my work plane to the top of that. Select my most recent component, hit D to drop it on the work plane. Put the work plane back where it was. And I'll line it up there. I like to make it transparent and look at it straight from the top. I'll use the arrow keys to kind of bounce it around. And I'll take the transparency off. Alright, looking good. Looking pretty similar to the example that we started with. Let's finish it off by doing this little tip. This tip, we're just going to stack up a few cylinders a few different times, make some layers. So we'll start by bringing that cylinder in. And so this is the shape we're going to start with, kind of the goldish shape. So let me zoom in to the work plane here so we can see what we're doing a little better. And I think it might be a little easier to build this thing upside down. So let me start by bringing it out to that 40 millimeter diameter we've been working with. I'm going to bring this one down to kind of skinny here. Let's go for 5. Right, I will crank up the sides and give it just a small bevel. Right. So that is the first layer. And I'm going to do 2 more of them that will make up the gold part. So I have it selected. I'll do Command D to duplicate. Hit the black cylinder to raise it straight up. And then I want to change the width of this, or the diameter of this, quite a bit. Let's bring that down to a 10 millimeter diameter. So I'll do 10 and 10, like that. I'm going to increase the bevel a little bit on it. I want to make these look a little different. So I'll also make this one not 10 deep, but a little bit more than that. And actually, I think I'm going to make this one a little wider too. But maybe not quite so high. Alright, let me get these things aligned. So I will select both of them, hit the Align command. I'll align them on the X and the Y. But it's a little high right now, right? So let me bring it down by changing my work plane. Selecting that second object, hitting D to drop it on the work plane. Move my work plane back. And now it's looking Pretty good. All right, I'll do a similar one by doing Command D and bringing it straight up. And again, I'm just going to make this one a little thinner, a little smaller. So I'll shrink it up and go for about that. Looks like 11.5. I'm just getting kind of artistic here at this point and not worrying about specific numbers. All right, looks good. Let me align them on the X and Y. And I think I will just manually drop this one down. I think I want to make it go inside a little bit so it's covering that other bevel. All right, that looks good to me. Let me select them. I'm going to group them up. And then actually I'm going to duplicate this one so I have a second copy that I can modify, but I'll put this one up in place right now. I'm going to do that by rotating it 180 degrees. And then changing that work plane to the top of my lightsaber, dropping my new piece by hitting D, put my work plane back, and then moving this over into position, again using that transparency trick. All right, big finish. Let's make a gray top for this thing. I'm gonna do that by I'll just rotate this one over right now, a full 180 degrees. I am going to select it and ungroup it so that I can work with the pieces individually, and then I'm just gonna play with it until I get a shape that I like. So I'm gonna grab this top one here and I'm gonna stretch it out. I do want this to look a little different than the previous one. So let me stretch that one out. I think I'm going to cut a little hole in there too. So I'm going to cut a hole in this one. I'm going to hit Command D to duplicate. I'm going to shrink up that duplicate a little bit. And bring it up. Change it to a hole. Group these things up. All right. And then I do want to put a little bit of a flange on the top there. So let me grab a cylinder and make it nice and big. Do this from the top view. I'll crank up the sides and shrink this up. Oops. Go for about a height of 5. Now I'm going to make a duplicate and then just shrink it up a little bit. Turn it into a hole. Make sure it's tall enough to cut all the way through that. Select them both. Oops. Didn't mean to hit group. I meant to hit align. So I'll align them on the X and the Y and the Z axis. And now I will group them up and I'll get a little rim. I'll get those ones all aligned and put into place. So I'll do that on the X and on the Y. I'm going to have to bring this up. And just shrink this up. select this and group it. And change this to, we're going to go black. I will go gray. And we'll put it into position. All right, there you go. Now you can definitely see that there is some variation from the original model that we started with, but that's one of the cool things about lightsabers. You can really play with it and have fun, and that's what you should be doing. Have fun.